Welcome everyone to Journeys to the Books of the Prophets. We continue with the Book of Yehoshua. Last week, we touched upon a very, very famous incident in the Book of Yehoshua, but tonight we're going to go into much more depth. And I'll read the verses to you, and you'll recognize immediately the incident I'm talking about. For those who want to follow, we're in the 10th chapter, the 12th verse. We're going to read 3 verses here. So it says, Az yidaber Yehoshua la'Hashem b'yom tet Hashem et ha'emori lifnei b'nei Yisrael. That then Yehoshua spoke to God on the day that God delivered the enemy, the Amori, to Israel. Vayomer, and Yehoshua said, Le'enei Yisrael, he said this in the eyes of all of Israel. Now it's very, very public. And he said, Shemesh begivon dom, v'yoreach be'emek ayalon. And what did he say? He said the sun should literally be quiet. It's understood to stand still in the sky, but as we'll discuss, it literally means to be quiet. And the moon in the valley of Ayalon. Vayidom HaShemesh, and the Shemesh was silent, meaning it stopped moving in the heavens. V'yareach amad, and the moon stood still. Ad yikom goy oivav, halohi ketuva al sefer yeshar. And this phenomena happened until Israel was able to defeat its enemies, and it's written in what's called the Sefer Yeshar, the Book of Straightness, the straight book. V'yamod hashemesh b'chetzi hashemayim, and the sun stood still in the middle of the heavens. V'lo ayen lavo k'yom tamid, and it didn't move for an entire day, or literally like a whole day. V'lo haya k'yom hahu lifnei lefanav v'achavrav, and there was never such a day before this or after it. Lishmo Hashem b'kol ish, that God listened to a person's voice in this way. Yisrael amot, to that. Excuse me. There was never such a day that God listened to the voice of a person. Ki Hashem nilcham liYisrael, because God fought for Israel. So this is a very well-known story in the book of Yehoshua. And as I mentioned last week, these 2 places that are mentioned, Givon, which is right outside of Yerushalayim, and Emek Ayalon is the valley of Ayalon. I pass by them all the time. They're somewhat in my neighborhood. Emek Ayalon is about 15 minutes from my house, and Givon is about 20 minutes from my house. And so this whole thing is like very real, because we do have a tradition that Givon today is more or less in the same place as Givon then, and Emek Ayalon is in the same place as it was then. As we discussed many times, places are named for places in the Tanakh, and it's not necessarily that that's where the mention of the name in the Tanakh actually was. We'll actually see that if we get to it later today. So we started last week. I'll just review very quickly, where the Gemara says that this was not the first time that someone had stopped the sun and the moon and the stars. That Moshe did it when he fought Amalek. And then I told the whole story, which I'm not going to repeat, of Nakdimon ben Gurion, a whole story of this man who really went out of his way to procure water for all the people coming to Yerushalayim. And God made a miracle for him that he wouldn't have to pay this enormous amount of money, that God made the sun stand still in the sky for him. And that's where we stopped last week. So now we're going to continue. And many of these comments are not necessarily in any particular order. It's just these are the notes I took on at least 20 pages in Mamlo Ez that is dedicated just to this one incident. So the question is asked, the verse says, there was never a day like this before or after. And so the question is, well, if others had stopped the sun, or God had stopped the sun for them, then what was so different about this? Now, obviously, stopping the sun and the moon in the sky is not something that happens every day. But still, why is this like, there was never a day like this that God listened? So one of the things we could say is, when Moshe stopped the sun and Nakdimon, it wasn't that they commanded the sun and the moon to stop like Yeshua did. It was that they needed more time to accomplish what they had to accomplish, and God made this miracle happen. And so the unique thing here is, and that's why it says that it was unique, that God listened to a person. Can you imagine? Yeshua is commanding the sun and the moon to stand still in the heavens. And we're told it wasn't just the sun and the moon, it was the whole heavenly array, all of the stars. It doesn't work that just the sun and the moon stop and everything else continues. It's like as if everything stopped. So that's one thing, is that Yeshua is the one who is commanding here, and God is responding and doing what Yeshua has said. Another thing, and we discussed this last week, is this was part of a war that 5 kings attacked the city of Givon, and these were the Givonim that had actually tricked Israel into making a peace treaty with them. And yet Israel, so the 5 kings were very upset with Givon for not fighting against Israel. And so when the 5 kings attacked Givon, Givon sent a message to Yeshua saying, we have a covenant with you, please help us. And Yeshua responded. He came, and these were 5 kings that he had to defeat anyways in order to take possession of the land. And so this is how the whole war started. But as Israel was chasing after the 5 kings, they passed a place called Beit Haron, and there hailstones came down from heaven, like miraculous. And so it's explained, it wasn't just that the sun and the moon were stopped in the sky. There was another miracle here, is that, as the verse said, God was fighting for Israel. God was making miracles happen. So that's another unique thing about this. Plus the fact that in one day, Yeshua is able to defeat 5 kings. So that also was a very unusual day. It's like if we would compare it to today, I think everyone's aware that Israel is quite literally fighting a 7-front war now. 7-front. And if we can imagine that in one day we would be able to defeat definitively Hamas and Hezbollah and the Houthis and the Shiites who are firing from Iraq and in Iran and in the Shtachim, in the territories, and in Syria, they're shooting at us. So let's imagine in one day, we could attack all of them and be completely victorious. So that's what happened here. 5 kings were defeated on this day. So now let's just look at the language. What does it mean literally that the sun was silent? Vayidom. Now this word, it comes up in the Chumash when after the 2 sons of Aaron die on the day that the Mishkan is dedicated. And so Moshe is trying to comfort Aaron, and he does it in such a way that the Torah says, Vayidom Aharon. Aaron was silent. In other words, he accepted what Moshe was telling him, and he was silent. Vayidom Aharon. But it's the same language here, that the sun was silent. But the question is, what does that mean? So if we look at the midrash called Perek Shira, where the midrash is 70 different creations from the mineral world, the vegetable world, and the animal kingdom, all have a song. The stars have a song, the sun has a song, the moon has a song, the date palm has a song, the wheat fields have a song, the rivers have a song, and then it goes to all the animals, from animals to birds to insects. Each one has a song. And so what's understood here is that the motion of the stars and the sun and the moon is a manifestation, is an expression of the song that they sing. In other words, music is vibrations. And every entity in this world, because everything is made up of atoms, and atoms are live energy, they're vibrating. So everything, including human beings, we call it an aura, that our vibrational pattern actually creates a force field around us. And we're told that there's a deep connection between the song that each creation sings and their reality. So this is, of course, connected to the idea of string theory, that the smallest components of the physical material world are vibrating strings, which create the reality of the atom. And of course, the atom is the structure, the fabric of the universe. So everything is vibrating. So we're told that when, and this is the Midrash, that when Yeshua ordered the sun to stop in its path, so the sun said, "Who are you to tell me to stop my rotation in the heavens? I don't answer to you, I answer to God. Only God can tell me not to do what I am created to do." And then the sun says, "I was created on the 4th day. You were only created on the 6th day." So the question is, what was the sun trying to prove here? And so for those who have my book, Life, Soul, and Consciousness in All of Creation, I quote from Sarah Yehudit Schneider in her book, Eating as Tikkun. And there she brings a very, very deep Kabbalistic concept that many people are not aware of. And that is that it's very counterintuitive. But the truth is, all of quantum physics today is counterintuitive. It's bordering on mystical and paradoxical. And so she brings this Kabbalistic idea that the closer a creation is to the initial creation, meaning the first day of creation, in potential, the higher their lights. Because we know in Kabbalah, there's the terminology is lights and vessels. The idea of energy, light, and the way that we receive the light and we package the light and then we deal with it is called the vessel. And so the son was saying, I was created on the fourth day. I'm closer to the initial creation than you are. Therefore, my light is much greater than yours. So who are you to tell me to stop my rotations? But Sarah Yehudit Schneider continues and says, that's on the level of potential light. But on the level of vessel, the further on in creation, the more complex creation becomes, culminating in the creation of human beings. And we're actually told that the human brain is more complex than any computer in the world. In a certain way, listen, it's the human brain that makes AI. Everything is about AI right now, but it was human intelligence that created AI. It didn't come out of thin air. So here's a very paradoxical idea that in theory, the mineral world and the vegetable world and even the animal world, in pure closeness to the original light of creation, is at a higher level than a human being. Yet on the level of vessel, which means the ability to use this light. In other words, a more primordial creation can have more life, more light, but if it doesn't have the vessels to actually translate that into a more living reality, then the light remains more theoretic, more passive. So it's a fascinating idea, and it should give us much thought, especially when we go out to nature and we commune with God, and we also commune with nature. And nature helps us commune with God. And that's when we really can feel, not so much intellectualize, but to feel this idea that I'm giving over right now. The light in a waterfall, the light in a mountain, a light in the wheat fields or an orchard. These are all brimming with light and life. And we have the special gift of having the vessels that can then do more with it than the primordial creations. So that is a very deep thing. So Yeshua answers the son, it's true, you were created on the fourth day. I'm created later, but I have free will. I have free will, and that's what we say, Ein Mazal Yisrael. There is no rulership of the stars and the planets over Israel as long as we're in tune with God and Torah and mitzvot. And if we're not, then we're very susceptible to the influence of the stars. So now I just want to read for you from the Mamloez what Maimonides says regarding the sun and the moon and the stars. Now we have to remember that Maimonides was a great doctor. He said clearly in Mishnah Torah, if you want to know God, study the world around you. He was a great proponent of what we would call learning secular knowledge, because that gives us an understanding of God's creation. So the Rambam says, one second. So he says like this, I'll read it in Hebrew. He says, Shekol tzava shamayim hainu hashemesh v'yarech v'kochavim kulam balei chaim hem u'balei nefesh v'yesh behem sechel v'dat u'tvuna. So he says really an astounding thing. He says that that all of the hosts of heaven, that is the sun and the moon and the stars, all of them are living entities. And they have a certain level of nefesh, a certain level of soul and consciousness. And they have a certain level of what we would call chachma, bina, and dat, wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. He said, and then he quotes from David HaMelech, who many times in the Psalms talks about the life force and the consciousness in all of creation. Again, all of this is written in the book Life, Soul, and Consciousness in All Creation. So he quotes David HaMelech, who says, Hallelu shemesh v'yarech, Hallelu kol koveor. David, in a certain way, commands or encourages the sun and the moon and the stars to praise God. But we know from our prayers that the heavenly hosts on their own praise God, because they have a certain awareness and they are aware of God's life force in all of creation. And this is also one of the ways that we understand the dream of Yosef. Yosef had two prophetic dreams about his rising to authority. And he said that he told his brothers and his father that I had a dream that the sun and the moon and the stars bowed down to me. And so Yaakov, who was a master of dream interpretation himself, and in fact, that's probably where Yosef gets it from, is that he interpreted that the sun was himself, the moon was Yosef's mother, and the 11 stars were his brothers. That's how Yaakov interpreted it. But on a different level, the level we're talking about here, this is how Yehoshua answered the sun, is that ultimately, it's not so much that we bow down to you. That's idol worship. That's what Avram came to dispel. Idol worship, to bow down to the stars and planets as if they had their own independent power to them, and they weren't agents or vessels for God's energy in this world. And instead, here, Yosef saw the sun, the moon, and the stars bow down to him. And that's what Yehoshua is answering the sun. We have free will. Therefore, if I need to command you, then that's what I have to do. And so then the sun said, but I have to sing my song. The world can't exist if I don't sing my song. Then how is the earth going to exist without the sun? So Yeshua said, I'll sing your song. And that's what it means, Vayidom Hashemesh, that the sun was silent because Yeshua took over his song for however long the sun stood still. There are different opinions brought. How long did the sun and the moon and the stars stay silent and not move in the heavens? In the text, it says kiyom tamim, like a whole day, but it's ke, like a whole day. And so there are different opinions. Some say it was for 12 hours. Some say it was for 36 hours. Some say it was for 48 hours. We will probably never know. At the end, I'll bring some ideas from the science or the physical world. What possibly are we talking about here? There's another idea that a midrash says when God created the world, every creation was created what's called al tanai, on with a, how do you say it in English? With a stipulation that at a certain point they will have to or might have to change their basic nature. This is a midrash. The midrash says every creation was created to follow its nature. Water follows its nature. Fire follows its nature. Toby says conditionally. That's a good word, conditionally. And so where do we see this? This is a very, very well-known idea with the splitting of the Reed Sea. And after the sea was split, Israel passes through, and now it's going to close on the Egyptians who are chasing. So it says that the water returned le'etono. It returned to its strength. And so the Midrash says, don't read it, it returned to its strength. It returned to its condition, its stipulation, that when God created the Reed Sea, it was on condition that when in the future Israel would have to cross the sea, that the sea would change its basic nature. So this is a very, very deep idea because it applies to every human being also. We have, and we've discussed this before, we have what's called a first nature, the way we're born, nature and nurture, our basic nature. And then when we have what's called our second nature, when we work on ourselves and we try to improve ourselves and fix ourselves and refine ourselves, then we create from the first nature a more refined second nature. But many times in life, and I'm sure many people have experienced this, that there's a certain time that we have to transcend our natural inclination to act or answer in a certain situation, that everything in us is like, we have to do it like this. But at the last minute, this deep intuition enters our consciousness and like, no, this time I'm going to do it differently. So this idea that every creation is created, that at a certain point, it will need to change its basic nature. And so that's what happened with the sun. The sun and the moon and the stars, they have the nature that God gave to them. They're doing what they're supposed to do. But for every general principle, there's always an exception. Another idea that's brought down is, and we mentioned this before, that the seventh day of Israel going around Jericho was on Shabbos. They started, the first day was on a Sunday, then a Monday. The seventh day, when they blew the shofars and everyone yelled and the walls came down, was on Shabbat. But this, we learned that halachically, when faced with enemies, one can even fight on Shabbat, and the whole instructions for defeating Jericho is coming from God. But we're told that nonetheless, the people felt like a little bad that they had to do this on Shabbat. And so according to tradition, the day that Yehoshua stopped the sun was on a Friday. And again, these are all different opinions, different perspectives. And one of the perspectives was that along with all the other reasons that Yehoshua needed to stop the sun in order to win the war, was that this time they wouldn't have to do it on Shabbat. And so therefore they finished the war before Shabbat, and then they were able to keep the Shabbat. Again, that's just another perspective here. Now, we already mentioned that Moshe stopped the sun and the moon and the stars when he fought against Amalek. But there's another tradition that also when he fought against Sichon, which is on the other side of the Jordan, spoken about in the end of the book of Bamidbar, and then mentioned a number of times in the book of Devarim and Deuteronomy, is that there also, it's not mentioned in the Torah, but there also it's mentioned that that God helped Moshe in this war by stopping the sun. So then the question is, about the sun, it says, Vayidom Hashemesh, the Hashemesh dome, the sun was silent, but about the moon, it said it stood. So the question is, well, what's the difference here? So one of the answers is that the sun sings its song during the day, and the moon only sings its song at night. And since this was during the day, and we know that on certain days, depending on what part of the month, that the sun and the moon are both in the sky at the same time. Or sometimes the moon is not seen very much during the day. So it says that the moon stopped because it only sings its song at night. And at that point, it was day. So it didn't need to. Therefore, it just said it stood. Now, about this mysterious book, it says this incident is written in Sefer HaYeshar, the book of straightness. It's very unclear, even to all the commentaries, exactly what this book is that it's talking about. In the book of Devarim, it talks about, or it could be Bamidbar, that these wars that Moshe fought with Sichon and Og, it says they're written in Sefer Milchamot, in the book of wars. And again, it's like, well, what is this book? Where is it? So it's a bit mysterious what it means that it was written in the book of Yeshar. But interestingly enough, sometimes the whole book of Devarim is called Sefer HaYeshar, the straight book, because this is Moshe's last will and testament to the people. He's reviewing the whole 40 years. He's strengthening the people. He's giving them rebuke. He's encouraging them. It's all happening in the book of Devarim. So some people call the whole book of Devarim is called Sefer HaYeshar, how to walk the straight path. And one of the ideas is, but why Sefer Devarim? And so the following verse is in Sefer Devarim. It says, "V'yasita hayeshar ve'atov be'enei Hashem," that you should do what is straight and good in the eyes of God. And that appears in the book of Devarim. Again, the word yeshar, straight. You should do what's straight and good. So the commentaries ask, well, what does that mean? What's the definition of being straight and good? And so one of the ideas is this means what's called mishurat hadin, beyond the letter of the law. Not only applying the letter of the law, but in certain cases, going beyond the letter of the law in helping other people or dealing with a situation, mostly with our relationships with other people. And so interestingly enough, when it's talking about the destruction of the second temple, and various reasons are given, probably the most quoted is because of sinat chinam, because of unwarranted hatred of one for the other, of ceaseless hatred. That's why the temple was destroyed. But another reason that is given, and it sounds very contradictory. It says, because they ruled at that time according to din Torah, according to the laws of the Torah, the judgments of the Torah. So one would say, well, what? That's a good thing. They upheld the laws of the Torah, the judgments of the Torah. But it's explained when they made the statement that the temple was destroyed because they ruled according to the judgment of the Torah, is that the people didn't go beyond the letter of the law. There was a lack of understanding, compassion, mercy for other people, situations that people were in. Just black and white, just din Torah, just judgment. And so that's one of the reasons we're told that the temple was destroyed. And so here we see the importance of going what's called beyond the letter of law. Sometimes it's called the spirit of the law. Now, the spirit of the law and the letter of the law are not in contradiction. But sometimes the question is, where is the emphasis? Where is the preferred way of acting? Okay, so I'm going to end with a couple of ideas as to, if we try to understand from a physical, material, scientific point of view, did this really happen? Is this just a made-up story? Is there a reality to it? Again, it says kiyom tamim, like a full day. Okay, we don't exactly know what that means. Just like there is great debate in the 6 days of creation, when it says Vayhi erev vayhi voker yom echad. It was evening and it was day, one day, second day, third day. Exactly what that means in relationship to time. So one of the ways that we could answer, and we know that there is what's called time dilation. The idea that when matter is in a state of velocity and it approaches the speed of light, well, time slows down to the point that at the speed of light, there is no passage of time. So this is in the physical world. This is a physical principle that time is relative, and there is what's called time dilation. if you read the books of Gerald Schroeder and others who not only attempt but make a very, very good case that the 15 billion years being spoken about in science today of the age of the universe is not a contradiction to the Torah account of 6 days and then Shabbat. And they do it through physics, through velocity and light and the expansion of space and all of these different principles. But it also holds true for consciousness. And we know that everyone has experienced this in different ways. In an unconscious way, we could, let's say, fall asleep for like a cat nap and actually dream. And in the dream, it's as if hours go by, days go by, lifetimes go by. And then we wake up and we realize that we fell asleep for 20 minutes. So in other words, in the unconscious, dreams are what's called dilation of time. It's a different accounting of the way the seconds tick on a clock. But it's also the same thing with consciousness, that sometimes a moment or a minute or an hour can feel like a lifetime. You're waiting at the bus, or you're driving your car, you're at the light, and you're already 10 minutes late to a really important meeting, and you're like freaking out. And the light, it seems like it's never going to turn. And so on a clock, maybe 10 seconds goes by. But in our consciousness, it's like it will never end. This light will never turn. And then we could have the opposite. Let's say we go on vacation, like the best vacation of our life, 2 weeks, everything is just tremendous. And then on the last day, we're at the airport and we start thinking like, where did those 2 weeks go? Like, did they really happen? Was it a dream? So in other words, sometimes a year can seem like a split second. And the more we age, in a certain way, the more elastic time becomes. So that's just one idea. Another one that has been proposed, there's no proof either way, but we do know absolutely that at different times in history, the axes of the earth either flip or tilt. And it's not something that happens every day, but it is talked about extensively in science, especially when we're dealing with longer periods of time, where at certain times the tilt of the earth changes. And in the experience of the tilting of the earth, it could have left or led to an experience as if the sun, moon, and the stars didn't move. And it could have been that it was, as we said before, 12 hours or 36 hours or 48 hours, or it could have been much shorter, but the experience was like a whole day. All of a sudden, Israel had the time to defeat their enemies. So this is a possibility. Another fascinating thing I looked up was that actually at Cambridge, they went through Cambridge University in England. They went through all kinds of ancient books and alignments of the stars and everything. And they actually came up with a date that they're proposing this happened. October 30th, 1207 BCE, before the Common Era. In Jewish tradition, it was 1273. 1273. It was like a 70-year difference of the counting, but it's close when you're talking about thousands of years of Jewish history. It's like in the same page here. And there was this idea that there was a certain arraignment of the stars, the sun and the moon. It's been ruled out that it was an eclipse, because an eclipse only happens for a certain amount of time, and there isn't the appearance that the sun and the moon stop for a long time. It's just the sun will be covered over by the moon, either partially or fully. If it's a full eclipse, it's just the opposite of what's being described here, where it was daylight for an extensive amount of time. So it's been ruled out an eclipse for trying to understand this. But I read when I was researching this, written by a scientist, and her name is Cheryl Powell. And she was in a conference in, I believe it was Las Vegas. And after a long day of conference, she went back to her hotel. And let's say the day ended at 7 o'clock. So it's dark, everything. And at a certain point, she just wanted to look at the lights of Las Vegas. And she opened up her blinds. And to her tremendous amazement, right in front of her, the entire sky was light. And she's like, I don't understand. What is going on here? And then she looked to the left and the right, and it was dark. It was night. And she writes about this. And she tried to do research as what could have been happening. And she doesn't know the definitive answer, but she came up with that at the time she was looking, there was some object in the sky that was reflecting either the sun or the moon or both of them, or the lights of the city, in a way that the middle of her vision, it appeared like day. And again, the two sides were dark. It was night. And yet in front of her, a good portion of the sky was as if it was still day. And she said until this day, she doesn't know what happened, but that's all she could understand, that there was some object in the sky. It could have, who knows what it was? Who knows what it was? But it was reflecting light in a way that it appeared like it was day. So that was quite interesting. And then the final thing that we have is, according to Jewish tradition, what day of the year did this occur? And according to tradition, it was the 3rd of Tammuz, Gimel Tammuz. Now that date might sound familiar to some people, because that's the day the Lubavitcher Rebbe passed away. And so in Chabad, Gimel Tammuz is a very, very significant day. Gimel Tammuz. What the connection is, we could use our imagination to try to understand what the connection between Yeshua stopping the sun and the moon and the Rebbe's passing away. But it is significant that it is on the 3rd of Tammuz, according to Jewish tradition. So we dedicated this whole class. I didn't actually plan it this way, but we're ending with the Rebbe passing away, and we wanted to dedicate the class today to the tragic murder of the Chabad Shaliach in Dubai, Rabbi Tzvi Kogan. May his soul have an aliyah, and may Hashem protect all the shlichim, Yidden everywhere. Everyone knows how out of hand things are getting in many places in the world. And we have to pray for God's protection. And may the memory of Rabbi Tzvi Kogan be for a blessing.